New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
From the New Thought Media Network, this is the Conscious Reality Show with your host, Sara Nichols, where conversation plus intention reveals a new reality. Every week, Sara and her guests will discuss what they know and what they don't. Experimenting in front of everyone with what else is possible. I'm Sunny Childs, and here is your host, Sara Nichols.
Thank you, Sunny. And good morning, everybody. This is the Conscious Reality Show, and I'm here. I'm so excited to be with you. I found something that I read yesterday really very comforting and gave me a sense of what was going on with me. And I'm going to read this to you so that you can also get this sense. It's by Marianne Williamson, and it's called A Dose of Love or A Dose of Course. For the first 3 months of a woman's pregnancy, most people, quite often even the mother herself, don't yet know what's happening. What's going on in the inside isn't yet signaled by much in the way of changes on the outside. That's true of personal and societal change. It's much like the angel Gabriel saying to Mary, "Tell no one." There's something about the stupendous changes in life that are presaged not by roaring trumpets, but by silence. Conception, whether it be in a womb or in society, is hidden from the naked eye. So it is in America today. While externally the most dramatic changes are underway, beneath the surface, there is something equally dramatic occurring. It is invisible, it is silent, but it is the conception of a new world. It is birthing in the shadows, incubating in the alchemy of millions of people's hearts and minds as we try to process what's happening, not yet articulated, but destined to come forth as surely as seeds will sprout. We will be guided by a voice within. The reason that we don't know now what to do is because we have not yet become the people we need to be. Not only to discern the correct guidance, but to be able to carry it out. Since November 5th, there has been a lot of activation. Many people slapped up right up the side of the head, waking up and growing up. Today's political activation is mainly internal. This isn't the moment to be marching in the streets so much as a moment to be attending to some changes in our own souls. Whether we call it that or not, it's what millions of people are doing. Put bluntly, we need a miracle now, which is only terrifying if you don't think they can happen. But they have happened repeatedly throughout our history, actually. The abolitionist movement among white Americans arose from early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. Many leaders of the women's suffrage movement were religious Quakers, and Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. Malcolm X, even in his most militant phases, was insistent that the walls of injustice would only be torn down if we first purified our souls. Miracles only show up where there is love, and they are deflected where there is not. The over-secularization of much of the left is as dry and barren as the faux religiosity of much of the right. On both sides of the political spectrum, judgment and hate block the way to the miraculous? How do we erase the judgment and hate from our own souls? First of all, by noticing it. If we're honest with ourselves, we see that most of our anger is delivered at those who simply had the audacity to disagree with us. But no one owes it to us to agree with us. No one has a monopoly on truth. And this country belongs to all of us. Dear God, please take away from me my self-righteousness, my arrogance, my absolute certainty that I'm right and others are wrong. Amen is a really good prayer. In the words of Martin Luther King, the creation of the beloved community will require a change in external circumstances as well as a qualitative shift in our own souls. A new state of being precedes a more effective way of doing. And she says even more, but I'll stop there. Now, I wanted to read that just for myself to get it anchored in me, but also because my guest today, Phoebe De Mund, is a person who I talk about this kind of thing with. I talk about it with her because we are both followers of politics. We're both spiritually grounded. We're both interested in how do we use spiritual tools to deal with what comes up in all aspects of our life, including the political and our feelings and opinions about all that. Phoebe De Mund is, among many other things, a visionary public servant, a spiritually wise woman, a heart engager, and someone who I love very dearly and who, without whom this show might not even exist. So please welcome Phoebe De Mund. And hi, Phoebe.
Hi, Sarah.
Can you believe it?
Wow, I can't believe this is actually happening.
I know. Well, for those of you who don't know, this show largely grew out of Phoebe and I having lunch and having these great conversations with each other, which I, because I'm much more megalomaniacal than Phoebe, would constantly think, oh my God, I wish that were recorded. I wish that were recorded. And I kept saying, we should have a podcast. And I don't know, Phoebe, did you ever think we would have a podcast, or did you just think, yeah, it would be fun if it was recorded? I can't remember what you thought about that because I wasn't inside your head.
I think that you had more confidence from the outset that our just having conversations was podcast worthy.
Yeah.
I thought if we were going to have a podcast, we we're going to have to get clever about how to frame the conversation. So I'm glad you did all that work and I just get to show up and have this conversation with you. I'm really, really honored that you asked me to be on this with you.
It's so great to have you on here. Yes. And I think you're giving me too much credit. I don't think I have figured out yet how to frame that or do any of that. I'm mainly just having conversations with really interesting people. And if someone else happens to be listening or watching, so much the better. I mean, we do our best to get it out there. It does seem like a lot of people have subscribed and watched some things, but and we do have at least 2 loyal fans.
Okay. Hi, loyal fans.
Lily and Tony and who
Nice
else? What else is possible?
Yep.
Well, speaking of what else is possible, just to get this out of the way, are you willing to tell your what else is possible story of how you basically never really thought that phrase, you always thought that phrase was kind of goofy and didn't never do anything?
It's not that I thought it was goofy. It was that you, like, one of the places I think that we, like there's so much you and I are like straight eye to eye on. And then there are places where our gazes differ a little bit, right? Like there's Vin and then there's like the edges. And I think you've had more confidence that what else is possible has the power that I experienced.
What happened?
So we were meeting with another friend for lunch,
Yeah.
and I pulled into the parking lot, and there were not a lot of spaces available, and the one that was very narrow, and I tried to get into it, and then I realized that I couldn't get into it, and I have auto sensors around my car, and my car came to an abrupt stop. But so I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. I backed out. I went out onto the street to park. And as I was parking, I could see that a crowd had gathered to watch me park and were kind of yelling at me. And when I got out of the car, they're like, like, what are you doing? You're hit and run. And then I was like, what are you talking about?
I didn't even know about the angry mob. I thought there was just that one person. Okay.
No, they were like, because they were having
they were sitting there
having like a baby shower or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so like this was, an element of the story that was hard for me, because this very, very pregnant woman comes out, and a woman who's also pregnant, not quite as pregnant, with also a young child on her hip. And they're like, you hit my, and the very pregnant woman says, I think you might have hit my car. And the other woman, her friend, is just fully up in her, like her
outrage,
righteous fury that at the baby shower, somebody would hit her friend's car and drive away.
Yes.
And like is looking at me like I'm scum of the earth. And you know me well enough to know that I don't countenance that stuff easily.
No, and nor just for our two listeners, there is no way Phoebe De Mund would ever hit and run anything, right? That's just not, she doesn't have a hit and run bone in her body. Like, I'm that kind of addict that would try to get away with something, but she's not.
So I'm mortified. I'm just absolutely mortified that they think I did this when I know I didn't. So I'm not like, I didn't get angry at them. I just was really sad and like frustrated that they believed this. Thank you. That they would believe this about me. And the woman with the baby is just like, just really getting under my skin, because I really don't like to have people mad or upset with me.
No.
I'm working on that separating myself from that childhood activation thing, but man, it's work.
Yeah.
So anyway, they came out, they agreed. I hadn't seen their car yet, but they agreed that there appeared to be no evidence that I had hit another car. And I took pictures of my car, and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go take pictures of your car. So I went back to the parking lot to take a picture of the car, and the paint color that had scraped her car was the same color as my car. And I was like, oh no, Sarah, I'm going to use the whole hour to tell this story if I keep going. But anyway, so
well, you don't have to tell all the details.
Okay. Well, so anyway, so I sent her the photos, and I said, like, I'm really quite sure that I did not hit your car. My car came to an abrupt stop. So I understand that what you saw looked like I hit your car, but it came to an abrupt stop so that I would not hit your car. I'm quite confident I did not hit your car. But here are the photos, and here's my insurance information, and, go look it up, take it to a mechanic. And if they say, yeah, absolutely, this makes sense, despite there's no evidence whatsoever on the other car, then we'll play it out again or whatever. And so I'm 10 minutes late, 10 minutes late, something like that, to lunch with you and our friend Michelle. And I'm completely distracted. And, I try to fix it. Lunch.
I try to fix it the way I often do, which is one of my occupational hazards that I'm trying to get over through spiritual work. And I suggest that you say aloud a certain phrase.
Yes.
Which is,
how can it get any better than this?
And what else is possible?
And what else is possible? Yes.
Yeah.
So I kind of let it go for a while,
Meaning
and
minutes during lunch.
but yeah, like I think I actually did kind of settle in. I'm like, well, there's nothing more I can do about it at this point.
Yeah.
So we had a really nice lunch, and
Yeah.
as I'm getting up to go, I just sent her one more thing. Like I hope that you will let me know what happens. And then because I sent her the text, I hope you will let me know what happens. She writes back while we're sitting there and says, oh, right after you left, the car that did hit me came back and apologized, and we've exchanged information.
But she wasn't going to tell you.
She wasn't going to tell me, right? But so, yeah, what else is possible? Well, right person might come back and take responsibility for what they did. That was astounding. That was an astounding display.
Yeah, that's great. The other thing this is making me think about, which I don't know if you and I have ever talked about, but those are the best, most fun things sometimes. I have a friend whose sort of bottom line that she works on spiritually is not making other people wrong. Like, in other words, not having to insist that she is right. And I actually sat in rooms with her, hearing her articulate this for years, and just was always like, okay, whatever. And, why is that? And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, no wonder I never paid any attention to that, because I am very interested in making other people wrong. And that would be an incredibly threatening, like, spiritual line for me to not cross. So I just wondered what you thought about that. Because if I were in your shoes, I would have so wanted to make that other woman wrong, because I was not because I wanted to make her wrong, but because I was just right.
Well, and I had intriguingly, I had zero interest in making the pregnant woman, like the baby shower woman, wrong. I just wanted to make the one who had been glaring at me wrong, I can't say that is a bottom line practice for me, but I've been actually really paying attention to that lately. Yesterday, I texted you that I have a tea carrier, and I asked you if you knew what I meant by that.
Right, and I totally don't.
And I meant to go look up
whose like
expression this is. No.
Okay.
So somebody maybe will listen to this someday and say, oh, that's so-and-so's story from this very famous spiritual book, and I can't believe she didn't credit them, but I just couldn't remember what it was. But there is some book that a lot of us have read where a person talks about how every day that they were trying to get something done while they were living in India, there was a tea carrier. In India, they come around, they say, chai, 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 I like to sell tea. And this particular one was just really like something about the one that would come and talk to this guy every day, or like try to sell him tea every day, just really got under his skin. Like, just, I don't remember whether it was the tone of voice, the timbre of voice, whether he was particularly pushy, whether it was just I don't remember exactly what it was, but the concept being in the book that a tea carrier, or that person as his tea carrier, is someone who is pushing buttons that are in you. They're like your buttons. They're not, it's not that person's fault you have those buttons there, but you've got those buttons there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going about living their life, but every time they pass by you, they're just like bonk, like right into the place where it just activates whatever's going on with you.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to think it's about them, right? Like, why do you keep doing that? Why are you like that? Stop being like that. Like, can't you just go away? But in this
Because
text,
I wouldn't have these feelings if you weren't activating them in me.
right.
So it's your
yes,
fault.
it's you. It's you
Yeah.
that's causing this for me.
Yeah.
But the deeper spiritual truth is that no, it's something, it's an opportunity. Like this
Yeah.
is like one of those weird universal spiritual opportunities where we are given like the teacher who doesn't look like a teacher, who actually looks like a super like frustrating human in our lives because they keep activating something that is unpleasant and unwelcome in our experience.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I encounter these tea carriers all the time, but I didn't have that name for them.
Yeah, I like it because it's a nice code. It doesn't.
Yeah.
and I mean, I also like it because it is a service. It doesn't feel like a service. It does not feel like a service.
No.
But it is a spiritual service when you encounter a tea carrier, like they're really giving you an opportunity.
Yeah, or when one gets reelected.
Yes, yeah, I think that there is a tea carrier for a large group of people who just got elected. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
But every time I speak about that, though, people agree, and then they just don't want me to say it anymore.
Yeah. I like, did you see my sigh? I was like,
yeah.
Are we going to talk about this?
No, we want to talk about little tiny tea carriers. We don't want to talk about big, giant, global.
Yeah, global tea carriers.
Well,
I mean, it's.
Yeah.
It is an interesting thing now that we are talking about it for me to reflect on. Like, I wonder how much of the reason that the recently elected, who shall not be named,
tea
carrier, I wonder how much of the reason that person is a tea carrier for me is what makes smaller, less global tea carriers also tea carriers for me. Like, how much is that a similar effect? I think that it is different.
You lost me.
Yeah, well, so I was thinking specifically about, I told you I've got a tea carrier right now. And one of the things that makes this person a tea carrier for me is that, like, I lose my bead on what's true. And I don't trust what I think is true. And the way that at the global level that person kind of is really my biggest tea carrier, like really was after the election in particular, is for a moment I just felt profoundly, not for a moment, I'm still like reeling in the afterwaves of it, right? I really was confused about, like, wait, who are we? What are humans? What is the journey that's happening? Like, what are we doing together here? And this guiding set of beliefs, which I want to say are formed in reality, felt very like maybe they're just wishful thinking, and that like the profound unsettling of that kind of impact is a real, like, tea carrier kind of thing for me. Like, when I can't tell what's true, and when I had an idea of what's true, And it seems in active repudiation by reality. That's really disorganizing for me and really unsettling and scary. And it just doesn't, no way brings out the best in me, you know?
Yeah. Well, so have you figured out some tricks for, or maybe tools for what you do with the information the T carrier is there to?
Well, not with the current, like more local one, right? But the global one,
or the global one, yeah.
is a little bit ironically easier because there's so much community to be found in people who are having a similar experience. And not just community in the present day, but community throughout history, right? And the evidence that people throughout history have lived through times when all around them other people believed a narrative and embraced a narrative that was completely counter to love is what's happening, right? And love is what's true. And we're all one. And they, you know, so I'm sure there were people who lost their way in that, but the people who didn't, the people who hung on to that are the ones who moved us out of those times, right? And the ways that they did that was by continuing to, you know, have faith, the evidence of things not seen, you know, okay, my eyes no longer are telling me that story, but my heart still is, and my own, you know, my internal plumb line. My dad always liked my dad was, you know this, but our listeners don't. My dad was a United Methodist minister. And one of the things he always had with him in all of his offices was a plumb line, which for those who don't know is like a surveying tool where you hang a weight off the end of a string so that you can see what straight up and down is.
Really is, yeah.
Really is, yeah. And so, you know, that plumb, I think people like the compass that points to north, like plumb line works for me because of that image from my dad's office. But I may not be able, the world may not tell me that my plumb line is correct, but if I deny what my plumb line says, then I lose me, you know? And so, and there's, I don't know, like you and I belong to traditions where often the question is, how's that working for you?
Yeah.
And in all of the conversations throughout that journey where I've had to have somebody, I think I've had to have somebody say, how's that working for you?
Have you had enough of that yet?
Have you had enough of that yet? Yeah. It's always about like, so when
are you going to wake up and notice that doesn't work?
Yeah. And that it doesn't work for me, you know, like there's an objective truth about what works for me that isn't necessarily an objective truth for all.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to go to acknowledge our sponsor of this show. And after a 2-minute break, during which time, if you need to run out of here and come back, we'll take you off the screen. Then when we come back, we'll talk more with Phoebe De Mund about all kinds of things.
This is fun. I'll be back.
Fun.
Yeah.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Thank you, New Thought Media Network. Here we are back with Phoebe De Mund having a wonderful conversation. So we've talked about T carriers. We've talked about plumb lines and finding your own internal truth. What else should we talk about? I know Sunny, our producer, wanted to hear about your recovery from sugar addiction. So maybe you can tell us. And sometimes she breaks in as the voice of God when she has questions. So we'll see.
What a great job.
Yeah, it is. And fortunately, she really enjoys it because the amount I pay her is non-existent.
Well, yeah, that's a nice perk.
I was wondering, Phoebe, hi, this is the voice of God. First of all, just to check, I think that it can be spelled either way, plumb line or plumb line.
Good.
Oh, okay.
But
good.
not for sure. Was just researching that when I was called forth.
She's a librarian in addition to being the voice of
well,
God.
anybody can look things up on the internet. That's not my special skill. My special skill is actually asking questions. So I do kind of enjoy this, and in looking over the kinds of things that you have expertise in and talk about. You're right on target in terms of trying to figure out what is true for you, and whether we in your spiritual practice, whether in fact it is externals that help you figure that out. You've talked about the T carrier, you've talked about other folks helping us see what's right. But how do you do that internally? And I'm thinking specifically around that idea of figuring out what's not working for you and what needs to shift, whether it's for yourself or in your larger practice as a public servant.
Wow. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, God. Well, I'll start macro and work my way to the micro. How about that?
Okay.
One of the things that I think that we've lost, speaking of plumb lines, that we've lost confidence in, is that our big problems collectively are government to solve. Because government, that's not how we think of government anymore. We think of government with a lot more distrust, a lot more fear. But I think of being a public servant as literally always having an ear for the common good. And the common good is still tricky terrain, because common good isn't I'm trying to think of the right words here. It's not a one size fit all, right? Like common good doesn't mean everybody can wear the same shirt in that classic one size fits all idea, right? Common good is, it's a much bigger concept. It's an idea that there is a way that we have to move forward collectively for most of us to move forward individually. And generally, I think I would hazard a guess that it's an internal compass thing that I suspect other animals have as well. This idea of what is the common good and how do you pursue the common good. It's a kind of selfless thing in some respects because it can't just be about what's good for you. It has to be about an idea of self that is better served, healthier, and more well when more people are healthy, better served, and more well, right? Like, so,
So not about any one person, but about the collective and what serves the greater good.
exactly, right. And I think that there's a lot of fear that means losers and winners, and I think that one of the sort of alchemical properties of what is the common good, as opposed to populism, is that it actually raises all ships. It's like like even if it wasn't what you wanted to have happen, it still makes your life better. As opposed to life's better when it's better when my life is better. Like, no, sometimes the common good makes your life better, whether or not is what you wanted to have happen. I know that's perhaps a paradoxical idea, but so I'm just an abstract thinker in general, which you happen to know about me, God, as does my friend Sara. But Sunny, let me tell you, I'm a very abstract thinker. And one of the things one of the ways that serves me is that I'm always thinking at this like 500 or 50,000 feet in the clouds level, and then trying to bring that down into like, okay, on the ground, feet on the ground, shoulder to shoulder with real human beings. What does that look like? How do you do that?
Yeah.
And one of the things and actually this goes back to weirdly, like the finding the plumb line or finding the truth in the midst of the world seeming off kilter, is that you just like the closer I get to an understanding of the complexity of myself, the more at ease I am in the world, because I know that I'm just a piece of a puzzle. Like I'm not the puzzle. I'm not extraneous to the larger picture, but I'm just one piece of the puzzle. And so what I have to do is be that piece of the puzzle. So to bring it back, like, so shoulder to shoulder feet on the ground, I have to live by the principles that work for me. And the principles that work for me are not easy to live by, so I don't do it perfectly. But the principles that work for me are kindness, honesty, accountability, integrity, being of service. Well, pursuing the common good. That's actually one of my principles. And
what's that mean in reality? Like, what are you actually spending your time on in the common good? What can you tell us?
Oh, you mean my real job? Are you asking me about what I get paid to do? Yeah.
You're a visionary public servant, and here you are.
Well,
I love you, Sarah, but I'm going to ask Phoebe to finish your thought before we go to that, because I feel like what I was hearing is really the kernel of what I was seeking. So I appreciate it, which
All
is
right. I will defer to God.
at least God's going to sum it up this way. And you can tell me, Phoebe, whether I'm off or not. Your plumb line is whether you're staying true to your principles. And when you ask yourself that, am I staying true to kindness, honesty, integrity, accountability, and the common good? And the answer is yes. Nothing else is actually important.
Yeah. Beautiful, God.
Thank you.
And I just want to go back to what triggered this, you're asking this question, which was Sara suggesting that you might be interested in my recovery from sugar addiction. Honestly, when sugar became at odds with my plumb line, when my consumption of sugar and the things I was willing to do in order to get sugar, in order to fill that craving, put me at odds with my plumb line, that's when I knew I needed help to deal with it, because I didn't know how to stop. And that goes to one other point I wanted to make, which I almost forgot, which is that, this distinction between the external and the internal is real. Like it would be impossible to navigate life as a human being if you didn't have that perception.
Mm-hmm.
But spiritually, it's a falsehood, right? Like spiritually, the external and the internal are like in interaction all the time, and as though there isn't a distinction to be made. And it can not always feel completely sane to perceive that. And so, there's a place you have to choose, like whether you're going to be a functional human being or whether you're going to go sit on a mountaintop and, commune with the internal and the external all day long. But I don't remember where I was going with that exactly, except to say that.
Well, maybe this is where you explain.
Well, I also have to say I've heard that. Thank you, Phoebe, for reminding me that the age of Capricorn, where we've just come from, and I don't know if you believe in any of this stuff, and I don't even know if I believe in any of this stuff, but the previous era that we were in spiritually was practice, sit on a mountaintop, get your plumb line straight, so to speak. And now we are moving into the age of Aquarius. I know we thought we were there before, but we weren't.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it is about getting in the mix and being able to, within and among our fellow humans, practicing our principles, and that light in the mix is going to create some changes that just being in our light brigade together up on the hill will not.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I know nothing about astrology, so I don't know what I believe or don't believe about astrology, but I knew enough to recognize that was astrology that you were sharing. But yeah, that's absolutely my sense of things personally, is that the work for me anyway, I feel that within that plumb line is stay on the ground, shoulder to shoulder right now. And I think a thought I wanted to close or bring, like, circle back on, was that one of the things that the sugar addiction and staying true to a plumb line for me requires is not just this internal self-awareness, but a willingness to let the external world support that internal self-awareness. So, like, knowing, like I said, like getting to a place with sugar where I was like, I need help. Getting to a place where I know I like, okay, if it looks like that, like, here's me, but the rest of the world looks like this. And I'm slowly starting to do this in order to understand what's going on. Like that's a time I need help too. And I can't correct it from inside on my own. I need that dance of the external and the internal in that, when that happens.
I'm just thinking about what. Well, I was hearkening back to Marianne Williamson's words that I read at the beginning, where she's talking about this internal sort of dormancy that we're in right now. And I guess that's good to just lift up in that we don't know until we know. Like, we can know we're off kilter and we can know that a change needs to come, but we don't always know what that looks like or what's ours to do or what we're going to do. And I'm definitely in that spot right now. Yeah. I mean, I remember somebody saying, I think it was on Facebook, right, but shortly before the election, some friend, Facebook friend of theirs had said something on their page that made them think that they were politically antithetical to them. And they said, oh, well, now I know who not to tell when I'm hiding Anne Frank. And that really stuck in my head. And then I've been realizing with more stuff in the news right now about the possible mass deportations that the time of hiding could come a lot faster than people think, or the choice of whether you hide or whether you don't hide. And it went through my head. I'm just going to be transparent about the kind of things that go through my mind. Just now went through my head based on some stuff I read in the New York Times, a reminder that mass deportations of all people who are here undocumented is perfectly legal. So it went through my head, oh, I couldn't really hide someone because it's perfectly legal. And then I realized, well, so was everything that was happening in Nazi Germany. That was all perfectly legal. They had made those decisions, though that was what the law was, and that's what they were doing. Of course, Anne Frank wasn't in Nazi Germany, but she was, in the sense that she was in an invaded territory of Germany's. And that could happen really quickly. And and Marianne Williamson uses quotes Martin Luther King's about the beloved community. And if all the people are part of our beloved community, and then they are being ripped out of our beloved community and sent into unsafe areas that they have chosen to flee, most of the people who are here are either political refugees or economic refugees, right? That's why they come. So they weren't able to survive where they were, or they wouldn't be here.
Right.
What do we do? What are we going to do? You
Yeah,
can't. Sacramento is a quote unquote sanctuary city, but then what's my responsibility as a person who lives in a sanctuary city?
Yeah, I will say that I have had questions in my head along those lines, but also specifically for me around the trans phobia and trans hatred as a mother of a trans young person. And I definitely don't rule out that the coming down from the mountaintop is going to mean taking the kinds of actions that people who managed to hold a plumb line when the world was doing this do, like like the people who hid Anne Frank and her family. I mean, that's totally that kind of thing, right? Like, here's the world is like telling you this is normal, and we're sort of adjusting to this normal, but there's a no, it's not. This is what's true. And I have to live by this. That is, that doesn't come for free. You know, it's like I heard somebody say that they want to start posting stickers everywhere. Like I totally relate to that. That's my own guerrilla like warfare go-to as well. I've never done it, but that's my fantasy go-to, is printing up a bunch of stickers that say something that I think is important to say. And the one that this person was talking about was freedom is dangerous, but then they're like, I don't think people would get it.
Well, by the time they get it, it's too late.
Well, what Sara, you just raised a really big, dark question that I think is we're all wrestling with. But I do think, Phoebe, what I'm hearing you say is it's an interplay. So if you've got your plumb line being your principles of kindness, honesty, integrity, accountability, and the common good, and a lot of folks around you are operating from different principles, they become the T carrier, and you begin to notice your principles even more and allow you to operate them from them even more powerfully, if not sometimes covertly. In these circumstances, I do love the idea of stickers as guerrilla warfare, and maybe we are going to see some stickers around that say, and I know Sara's had some practice with some magnets, but 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I have one somewhere to share. Anyway, so maybe I start seeing what else is possible on my phone poles and billboards, because I do think it's easy to descend into dark in a time when holding our light and sharing it is of utmost importance.
Yeah, that was a great way to bring all the threads together there, Sunny.
Does that mean it's time for us to wrap up?
It actually might be, though I do want to talk one last minute, Phoebe, about your, it looks like a new movement, if you will, which is your Public Servants for the Common Good. Is that something you can tell us about? And then we'll head on out.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. So Public Servants for the Common Good Network is an idea that I had as I was preparing. What I thought I was doing was preparing to complete my master's degree in social transformation. And I was going to use it as the platform for my my master's thesis final project. And then what I realized is that I needed a break from my work life and school life and parenting life. It was just too much. And so school was what gave so that I could come back to it sometime when I have more bandwidth. So right now, long story short, Public Servants for the Common Good is a website I created, but it's just sort of sitting idle for right now until I either retire or come into a wealth of time to give it, to develop it. It was born out of an awareness that there are a lot of people like me working for public service agencies, people who really, really care about the common good, who do the work specifically from that motivation. And it's exhausting because, like, even within public service agencies, it's not always, I'm going to use this, I'm stuck on this hand gesture now. Like, it's not the common good is not always the plumb line for public service agencies. It's often other things. It's expediency, it's political realities, it's bureaucratic realities, what can get done within the Byzantine set of rules to make sure nothing bad ever happens and no risks are taken that the public can't afford, which is all born out of good intention, but which stifles the kinds of changes that we need in order to address the real problems that we all face. So my idea was that if there were a network for people who have that, who needed that sort of group of support to hold the plumb line of, no, this is the right work, to keep going back to what serves the common good, even when it's hard, and to have people who are actively in support of that and sharing their stories of how they do that, that is a resource I would have and would appreciate. So I was going to try to create it, but I just need a little more bandwidth in my life before I can put the time into it that I'd like to.
Yes. Well, I understand you may have an empty nest in the next year or two. And yeah, that may help, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Phoebe. This time has just flown by, as does every minute I get to spend with you. So thank you so much for giving us an hour that you wouldn't normally give it at a 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. And so it's a real treat that you were able to fit us in. And I will just let people know that next week we have Paul Edison Lam, who is another proponent of the public good, a retired attorney, educator, stone and star whisperer. He is a person who's going to argue with me about whether geology is real or whether my spiritual reality is real. We had quite a passionate argument about that recently. We decided to have it on the air. And he's coming. And after that, we've got a whole bunch of other great folks that are coming. Dr. Victoria Bomberry, a tribal elder. And then we're going to take a break. And you can also see me other times on the net where I'm speaking and teaching. Feel free to sign up for my newsletter at sarastevensnichols.com. And then you can always hear about what's going on with me. Thank you very much, Phoebe De Mund. Thank you for this show. Everybody, thank you, Voice of God, Sunny Childs, and let's go.
Thanks to our guest, to host Sara Stevens Nichols, and to the New Thought Media Network. I'm Sunny Childs, producer of The Conscious Reality Show. Join us live next Wednesday at 9 a.m. or stream the show at your convenience. Subscribe to Conscious Reality Show YouTube channel so you never miss a show. If you'd like to learn more about us, Check out www.sarastevensnichols.com.